meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, September 8, 2022 at 6:13 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at the AISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. Board meetings are open to the public based on space availability to ensure social distancing and the health and safety of our community and staff. This meeting is streaming live on AISD TV and Apple TV. It's also being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. To our audience tuning in remotely and here in person, welcome and thank you for joining us. We will move to the approval of the agenda. Secretary Singh, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Wagner to approve the agenda, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes by all those on the dais. Secretary Singh, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Next is an opportunity for the public to share comments with the board. This time allows speakers to comment publicly on any topic of their choosing. We have time for up to 60 speakers. As a reminder, the district continues to provide time during the regular voting meetings on the board to hear from the public about agenda items for consideration and vote. This is an opportunity for the board to take part in active listening. And while we wish we could respond or provide feedback, we're required to limit our questions to requests for clarification or follow-up directly to the administration. Members of the public wishing to participate in the public comment portion of our meeting called a dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting to audio record their remarks. We will now play the recorded messages for public comment, so colleagues, please listen carefully.
Laura Yeager, community member, regarding item 7.1, culture of voting. Dr. May, President Rodriguez, and esteemed trustees, my name is Laura Yeager, and I am the founder and director of Texas Educators Vote, a nonpartisan program that encourages educators to model civic engagement for students, and in so doing, create a culture of voting. I am also the proud parent of 3 AISD graduates. This evening, I want to thank you for considering the culture of voting resolution. AISD has passed similar resolutions in the past, and I commend expanding it to create a school holiday on Election Day to ensure the safety of our students, as well as ensuring staff members have time to vote. Especially now, with democracy and public education in the political crosshairs, every eligible voter should be supported in their efforts to participate in our electoral system. TEV has 31 partners that include associations representing teachers, counselors, coaches, principals, superintendents, trustees, special ed professionals, parents, students, and more. We have free resources to make registering, researching, and voting easy, fun, and accessible. I encourage all trustees to wholeheartedly support this resolution. As always, I am happy to help in any way possible. Thank you.
This is Sharon Vane. I'm the parent of a Bowie High School junior and an AISD 2022 graduate. As the annual observance of Banned Books Week nears later this month, I want to reiterate how important it is to preserve students and educators' First Amendment rights and have strong district and school policies in place to ensure these protections. Now more than ever, it's crucial for our schools to not restrict access to age-appropriate books. It's so valuable for our students to be able to read stories about children and families that are like them and also not like them. That's how they learn, how they build empathy, and how they develop a curiosity about the world around them. When we restrict access to books that feature characters who are LGBTQ, Black, Latinx, or Asian, we are telling students who belong to these communities that their very identity is something to be ashamed of or kept under wraps. Please continue as a board to support policies that protect book access. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jen Krieger. I'm a D3 resident and AISD volunteer and advocate.
I'm commenting on agenda items 5.1 and 7.3. Regarding item 5.1, I encourage the district to move towards a more participatory budgeting process that actively engages community members in the development of the budget. It is a moral document that represents what we prioritize for our students, staff, and families each year. Therefore, the budget needs to be shaped by said students, staff, and families. Part of this participatory budgeting process requires much greater transparency about what is in the budget overall and at the individual campus level. The budget needs to use lay-friendly terms in multiple languages and with simple graphics that can be understood regardless of language. The Austin Alliance for School Funding Equity submitted on August 19th a detailed list of requests and recommendations to improve community engagement and transparency in this year's budget process. Part of our interest in greater transparency and accessibility is to shine a light on the disparities in sources and uses of public and private funding across campuses. We would like to see the district require reporting of not just government sources of funds, but also all private grants, business, PTA, booster, and individual contributions to the district, individual schools, and programs. I also support the proposed resolution on item 7.
Hi, this is Max Pierce. I'm a community member in Austin ISD, and I'll be providing public comment on agenda item 7.2, the Worker Protections Resolution. As of last week, the organization I work with, Texas Climate Jobs Action, we've been knocking doors and canvassing folks to talk about the labor standards that are brought up in this resolution, and the response has been overwhelmingly supportive of it. Our community recognizes that AISD is in a building and facility crisis, and that our school facilities are not meeting the needs, the basic needs we expect of them. And in every conversation we're having, we identify the same solution. AISD needs to guarantee that it's contracting properly trained, safe, well-compensated workers. If we have workers being misclassified or being overworked, rushing to meet deadlines, or without the proper training to do the job, we're going to see these facility issues continue, except you might just waste a bunch of money in the process. So it's simple. Invest in your workers up front, guarantee that these labor standards are met, and make sure the job is done right so that we have the best possible facilities for our students. I ask that y'all vote in favor of this resolution at the upcoming voting meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Candace Hunter. I'm a parent in the district. I'm calling regarding item 5.1. A budget is a moral document. We have heard this over and over. Public budgets are living, breathing reflections of community value. It indicates mathematically what its creators feel is most important. The Austin ISD budget is public funds, and the process should be transparent. Also, the board is responsible for approval of this document and fiscal stewardship of the district. They should receive presentations and documentation well in advance of the voting meeting that includes the budget proposal. Thank you.
Hello, trustees. My name is Valerie Turrios, and I'm a parent of a student at Perez Elementary. I'm calling in regards to agenda item 5.1, the budget development calendar. As you begin development of the budget, I would like to encourage you to make the budget accessible and transparent. This is essential to ensure financial equity and sustainability. To make sure the budget is accessible, each school's website should have a link to the district level and campus level budget in both Spanish and English at a minimum. In order for the community to be actively engaged in the budget process, the budget must also be comprehensive and written in a way that is easily understood. Additionally, at the campus level, private funds should be included in the budget. When some campuses receive the benefit of hundreds of thousands of dollars in private funds, but these funds are not accounted for in the public budget, it obscures the inequities that exist across our district. Thank you for your work in furthering equity in AISD.
This is Matthew Gonzalez, Business Manager of Laborers International Union, Local 1095, and former Community Bond Oversight Committee member for approximately 2.5 years. I'm calling to speak in favor of item 7.2 in regards to Worker Protections Resolution. This is something that, as a committee member, we had fought for some time. Unfortunately, we were only able to achieve OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 at the time for various reasons. We encountered some challenges. I am happy to see that today's board is more open to the idea of establishing basic worker protections and ensuring that all AISD projects are done above board and leveling the playing field for good contractors. We do appreciate your consideration for this item. I do strongly encourage that you vote yes. Thank you for your dedication to AISD and to the community.
Hello, my name is Joe Cooper. I'm the training director for Farmers and Pipe Fitters, Local 286 here in Austin, Texas. I'm a member of the community and have lived in Austin my entire life. And I wanted to provide some comment as far as agenda item 7.2, the worker protection resolution. This resolution will actually raise the bar for the contractors that are participating in this. And that's what's the essential part here. It protects the workers, but it's the contractors. So we're getting a better product for our students as well as our teachers. We're also getting contractors that have an apprenticeship component to their work and therefore train and reinvest in their workforce. So I would ask that you support this resolution in the voting meeting later on this month. Thank you. Bye.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Pollock. I'm speaking to you all tonight as a representative of the IBEW Local 520 here in Austin, a 15-year resident and a parent of 3 current AISD students. I'm calling to urge your support at the voting meeting later this month for the worker protection resolution in the interest of maximizing our return on public investment should the proposed school bond pass. This resolution will support a much-needed investment in addressing our severe shortage of skilled tradespeople, as well as an investment in the future of the many products of our schools who would benefit from the training, safety, wages, and benefits it requires. Nationally and locally, we fail to invest in developing our labor force, and Austin has already begun to experience the consequences of that failure, although many of you might not yet be aware of the situation we're in. This resolution would be a much-needed step in addressing the socioeconomic failure by ensuring that trade work in Austin is an attractive opportunity so that our industry can better meet Austin's construction and maintenance demands. If we don't make this course correction, we're in danger of a devastating shrink in our local economy because we simply don't have the workforce to build and maintain our infrastructure. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sal. I'm a local representative for the Painters and Glazers Union District Council of 10. And I'm here to speak in favor of agenda item 7.2. This agenda item will increase the lives and better the lives of construction workers and also allow people in the community that want to become construction workers to have good livelihood and provide equity for the community. This is a good policy, and this should be passed and enacted by AISD. This will not only just cause the creation of good jobs, but ensure that there's equity in the community, because as we all know, workers aren't just workers, they're community members, they have students going to these schools, and at the same time it provides a system for students that want to go into construction to be able to go into construction and have good jobs as we are promising them as an alternative to college. Thank you.
This concludes public comment. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? None. Okay, so thank you, trustees. As a reminder to our community members, please feel free to share any general comments or questions on non-voting items with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. Our next items are part of our commitment to discuss student achievement. And tonight we'll discuss the 2021-2022 district scorecard. Dr. Mays, could you provide our update tonight?
Yes, sir. So we'll have Dr. Reach, Ms. Hosak, and Ms. Casas coming up and joining us and leading us in this conversation tonight. And so this gives us a chance to look over our scorecard items and reflect on the progress or lack thereof. I can tell you all that I know during our last meeting we discussed potentially looking at our scorecard to look at where we have made progress and revisit those to increase our goals. And so we will be having that conversation and bringing that back to the board. But tonight it really is about going over what we have and where we currently are. So I'll turn it over to the team to take it away.
Thank you so much, President Rodriguez, Superintendent Mays, and Board of Trustees. We're happy to join with you tonight to go through our 2021-2022 district scorecard. Let's Just make sure as a reminder, this 21-22 scorecard was actually a multi-year, 5-year scorecard. It was originally approved November 16th. And the major change in this version was how we focused our scorecard indicators around our district priorities. If you remember, and I know that for a few of our trustees, this was actually your day one on the board. So you came into this ready to vote for this item right away. The original scorecard was aligned to the all-student groups, which was something that we had done in the past, was a typical process for our scorecards. We did end up amending the scorecard in December 16, 2021, where we wanted to look at those gaps that we saw and make sure that our goals were addressing our gaps. We further amended the scorecard on May 19th, 2022, where we were able to discuss some of those final targets and also go through our survey items. So every part of our scorecard is aligned to one of our 5 district priorities. And I want to go through our goals, starting with our first one, which is our student achievement and equity. So I'm going to move the window. Oh, that's their window. Well, what we're missing under that window for the trustees watching, because those watching at home won't see that box blocking it, is it just says 2022 actual. And that's the column that's either green or red. So our first section is our 5 goals around student achievement outcomes. As I mentioned, these are really focused on where we saw some gaps that the district needed to address and making sure that we were setting aggressive goals to get to that. So our goal 1 is focused on our special education services. For all of these goals, they are at the STAR meets grade level. That's goal 1 through 4 at the meets grade level. That's what you would typically consider the middle of the 3. And it's typically what we really believe is the standard to say that that's at the level we want students to be at. So for our first goal, we did set a goal of 25%, and we were able to get to 26. This also brought us back to where we were in 18-19, pre-pandemic, and showed an increase from the previous year. On the farthest farthest column, I did provide state data because the state has not released all of their data. For this goal, I'm not able to calculate where the state is currently at for special education, all students, all grades. When our PEAMS report is released, we will have that information and we'll be able to share that. For these other items, because the state did release some of this data for the state level, I was able to provide state level data. So goal 2 and goal 3 kind of go together. Those are our 3rd grade reading and math goals. They're also closely associated with our House Bill 3 goals, which I have on the next slide and we can touch on in just a moment. So again, looking at the meets grade level for reading, that's goal 2. We had a goal of 25%, and we did get to 32%. That was an 11% increase from the year previous, 7% above our actual goal. It is slightly below where we were in 18-19 by about 2 percentage points, and we are below where the state was. The state was at 41% for the economically disadvantaged students statewide 3rd grade reading. When we started to review where was the state overall for these previous years and where were we, looking back all the way to 17-18, the district has lagged the state in economically disadvantaged 3rd grade reading. We were, back in 17-18, we were about 1 percentage point behind. As you can see, we do have about a 9-point gap right now, but we did actually decrease that gap from 2020-21 to this year with our 32%. Kind of similar with our math, which is goal 3. We had a goal of 18%. We're at 25%. State still ahead of us at 31. But what we know is that we decreased our gap much greater than the state did. We were actually about 11 points away from the state. Last year, we're now about 6, but obviously still room to grow. And we are still behind in our 18-19 results where we were at 39%. So goal 4 is our middle school goal. This looks at all 6th through 8th grade students reading math. I'm sorry, I said all, but I meant economically disadvantaged students, 6th through 8th grade on reading and math. And how are we doing that? Because we really wanted to have an indicator that focused on where we saw some schools that were at highest needs. And we knew that our middle schools in previous years and in this year tended to have more schools at high needs according to the accountability system. So we wanted a goal that really captured that. We did meet that goal as well. We had a goal of 20%. We got to 24%, but still lagging the state, who for economically disadvantaged is at 33. Goal 5, the last of our student achievement ones, is focused on CCMR. We have data on our CCMR, so we're able to provide you a projected number here. We do believe that this is a good number, that we're going to end up right here, but we do not have this confirmed until the state releases their CCMR outcomes report, which we expect to have next month. Likewise, I'm not yet able to compare it to the state because I'll need that report for the state to share, and we don't have projected data for students across the whole state. But for Austin ISD, we know that we were about 34%, so 1% short of our goal. However, we did see a 5% increase from previous years, and we did get back above our 1920 rate. Also, there was no rate in 18-19 because the methodology for CCMR bonus was developed first for the 19-20 school year. So we were not able to go back further than that. But we do know that a lot of this has to do with our students who, while had a year during the pandemic, mostly virtual, were still able to stay in those CTE courses, get those certifications, take the needed tests that they needed to meet the CCMR outcomes bonus. So we're excited that more students are prepared for a college career. And then also we recognize that the higher the bonus, the more funding that the district gets to be able to invest back into our CTE program. So that's also, as a reminder, part of the reason why we wanted to look at this goal. I mentioned our HP3 goals, and because we do have a requirement from the state to both set goals around HP3, they also require us to share basically this chart that you see up here. So this is not the normal method that we present it because we really wanted to look at those student groups that we really needed to move the needle on. So this one is just all students and then the student groups. But we did want to share where we're at for grade 3 reading and grade 3 math. And the way you read this is that the first column is AISD, the second is the state of Texas, and then you have it for student groups. If you see a star there, that means that we had less than 5 testers, so we needed to mask it. If you see no number, that means that we did not have any testers under that student group. Overall, I think the big takeaways is that you can see that as a district overall, AISD outperformed the state, and our white students significantly outperformed the state, but we are still lagging behind and have gaps for our African American students, our Hispanic students in math, and some of our other student groups. So there's still some information for us to glean from here and look at how we target set going forward. So our next item is our student well-being. This is where we wanted to have student outcome goals that weren't just based on test or STAR or CCMR. So our 3 student well-being goals include our CTE, forgot the other part that we're calling it, but basically our student engagement indicator is kind of how we discussed it. We wanted to make sure that we had an indicator that showed us how connected students were into aspects outside of the academic curriculum, because we recognize how important things are like fine arts, athletics, visual arts, CTE, to students really getting excited about school, really, wanting to go make sure that they do well in all their classes so they can participate in these activities that they really love. So we looked at students who stayed within a coherent sequence. So what that means is that they have 3 or 4 years within a similar sequence. So they played athletics for 3 years. They did art 1, 2, 3. They did band for multiple years, even if it was different styles of band. So marching band and jazz band. But we wanted to see that it was the 3-year coherent sequence. We set a goal of increasing that to 51%, and we did just beat that at 52%. Also, I need to mention, this is an updated data. When I emailed trustees 2 weeks ago, I mentioned we did not yet have this data. We were still trying to pull it. So once we went live, we still did not have it. The original document, as we always do, is still on board docs, but I included another one that says updated CTE so that you can see what changed and that it was transparent to the public. But this is also now available on our website. Goals 7 and 8 is looking at disparity. This is actually the item that we're going to have a deep dive discussion on at our regular voting meeting in 3 weeks. But as you can see here, we wanted to, I'm sorry, this is the one that we just had last week. We wanted to ensure that we are decreasing the disparity that we saw for African American disciplinary actions and SPED disciplinary actions. So you see our goal of 15%, and of course, because we want to decrease that, we want the number to be lower than our goal. So for goal 7, we did miss that with still 17.5%. Goal 8, we did hit that goal. We also went back similar to where we were in 18-19 at 29.7%. Of course, our overall goal as a district is to both decrease the number of disciplinary actions in total, but then also ensure that there's not disparate impact or not a difference in who is receiving disciplinary actions. So that's what these 2 goals are focused on. Our next priority is teacher and employee well-being. Our first items are goal 9 and 10, and these are kind of paired together. And this is looking at the retention rate of our Title I school teachers at our Title I schools, and then the retention rate for any staff who are not a teacher. And we can go into more detail on how that's measured. This is the item that we will be discussing at our October info session, and we'll go into greater detail. But for our retention rate for Title I teachers, the goal is 80%, and our actual was 79.2%. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, Dr. Reach, but I think we have dropped below quorum on the dais, so. So we'll pause for just a moment while we have a quorum to conduct business. Thank you. All right, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So goal 9 and 10 are our retention items. So goal 9 was looking at teachers at Title I schools. And this would be measured by, did that teacher stay at that school, or if they moved to another Title I school, they'd still be captured in that indicator. Where they may not be is if they went to a non-Title I school, or if they moved to central office, or if they left the district.
Or in a non-teaching position.
Or, thank you, or just a non-teaching position. Goal 10, very similar, but it's staff in general that are not teachers. That one we did meet. We had an 83% goal, and we moved that up to 83.3%. And then goal 11, this is one of the items that we discussed back in May, and this is looking at our staff participation in our climate surveys. We wanted to set a goal in the actual participation, and that will increase. We shared back in May that we actually can set targets for that, because while it is a brand new survey, we have administered surveys in the past to the exact same group of people. So these earlier results that you see are the response rate on the TEL survey, now moving into our Panorama survey, but the same group. So it's a fair apples to apples comparison. We shared with the board back in May that we would probably look at setting a goal at 75%, which we did. But once we finally closed out our survey, we did slightly miss that. It had decreased down to about 72%. And so we missed that indicator. Our next item is culture of respect and customer service and equity. And this is where our 3 survey indicator items are. Again, we were able to discuss these back in May. We had discussed some proposals, and there was some additional discussion around what was the best indicator or indicators to use as part of the staff survey measures. In other words, what are the questions from the survey that would best make up that response? So this one is still a placeholder. As the district shared back in May for all of these, that we would propose perhaps looking at the overall measure of the school climate subsection. And that was through discussions with our teacher focus group that we had, through our discussion with Panorama Education, and from looking at what are the items that actually are most closely aligned with how people feel they are treated at their campus. So for goal 12, you see a proposed, and if that were to be the indicator, it's not right now, but if it were to be, that would have been at 60% for staff. For students, that result would have been 52% favorable. And for our families, and of course, they're asking how they feel their students' climate is for families. For staff, it's their climate. For students, it's their climate. For families, it's how is your students' climate. They would be at 71%. So one of the questions that we do have for tonight is how we can finalize these indicators and make sure that we start setting our targets moving forward and get that out before we release our fall version of the staff survey coming up at the very end of this month. So our very last item is our fiscal stewardship and prioritization. Goal 15 is our first rating, Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. We'll actually do a presentation on this at our voting meeting and a public hearing as one of our legal requirements. Overall, the district did meet this. We maintained above a 90. We received a 90, which is considered superior and in the top percentage of districts. Goal 16, that we will maintain our bond rating, which we have been able to do, still at that AAA rating, the highest rating available for school districts, and putting us in a very elite group of school districts in Texas that maintain that AAA. And then finally, goal 17 is the district will increase its student share within the boundaries who choose Austin ISD. So this looks at the information we have of the number of students who reside with Austin ISD boundaries, and then out of those, how many of them are attending an Austin ISD school, if they are age eligible. So if they're not included in here, then it may be that they're attending a charter school, they're attending a private school, a home school, or that they are transferring to an outside district outside of Austin ISD, although they reside here. We did show that we increased that. We set a goal of 81%. That increased to 81.6%. So that's kind of a summary of our goals. I wanted to let us know where we are at from those different goals. And I also want to mention that in the agenda item, you can see the full scorecard, where again, it's color-coded. The green means we met it. The red means that we did not meet it. And you can look for all the goals and the progress measures, which are, of course, those items that we spend in discussion with the board, basically every board meeting. So we have 17 goals and 14 progress measures. For 21-22, 3 of those did not have a rating, the survey ones. Overall, we achieved 10 out of the 14 goals, comes out to about 71%. And we achieved 5 out of the 14 progress measures, which is about 36%. Overall, if you're looking at all of them, we always discuss that these were never meant to be weighted equally, but just for the exercise here, if you were wondering where we're at, the 15 out of 31 is about 48%. So that ends our presentation on the scorecard. I'd like to turn it back over to President Rodriguez and Dr. Mays.
So I do want to thank the trustees for helping us establish the scorecard. Like you said, throughout the year, we'll take, of course, a deeper dive within each and individual goal, as well as progress measure. And so, again, we will be looking at and evaluating those goals that we met to evaluate and reconsider higher goals, and we'll be bringing that back to the board to help, give us feedback on those.
So trustees, this brings us to a year under our new process of reviewing and discussing student outcomes. Since September of 2021, we have had at least one discussion on each item on the scorecard, and for many of our most important student goals, we've had 2 or 3. So at this point, we'd like to provide the trustees time to ask questions on the scorecard. And tonight is our chance to view the scorecard as a whole and discuss how we're holding ourselves and our leaders accountable. So comments may also include discussion on the actual indicators and targets, and if they're still the best items for the district. The board also had a scorecard indicator to finalize for our staff satisfaction survey item under our cultural respect priority. And as we discussed tonight, let's remember our commitment to keeping our questions focused on our current vision and ensuring our reality matches the vision presented. So trustees, are there any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. So I'll start with slide, so it's 5, I believe. So for goal number 6, can y'all remind us, what are some of the strategies that are being used to encourage students to follow that, at least 3 to 4 courses in their high school career?
Yeah, and it's a strategy that really starts at 8th grade, because we want students to, while they're creating, their House Bill 5 plan, as we may recall, what is it that they have really strong interest in and they want to focus on. And of course, we even have distinctions that go along with it that students can earn. And so at 8th grade, it starts with trying to do inventories of student interest and seeing how that aligns with course offerings at the high schools that they're either assigned to or interested in attending. And, letting them know what's available there. Once they're actually at the campus, it's really a strategy for all of these departments to keep kids engaged and to continue on those careers, because we recognize that, of course, having a well-rounded education, incredibly important. We all need to experience a little fine arts, a little theater, a little visual arts, some physical education. But for some of those students who have a strong interest, it's really encouraging that lifelong process into it, because we also know that for many of our students, this doesn't end in high school, right? They're taking this on to help prepare for either their career or their college courses. So our counselors will always check in with students to see, how is their schedule, how is their interest, and I know from some experience of working with our high schools that it's quite often that the band, I'm going back to the middle school, but that our band directors, our coaches will actually go down to 8th grade to start sharing with them in 8th grade, like, here is what we're doing at this high school. Here are the courses that we're offering. Here's what you're going to do in this advanced CTE course. So I apologize that I kind of jumped back to that, but it was such a good thing I didn't want to forget to mention it. I don't know if Chief Casas or...
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we've been working on a standard course sheet that every middle school and high school, so that students know what should be available to them. Having that as a baseline district-wide for all middle schools and high schools, and then each school can customize it based on the additional courses. But we want to make sure that kids know what should be available to them so that they can have those choices in front of them.
The last thing that I would add is the level 1 certifications. We met with ACC the other day just to talk about incentivizing course completion early, so students can get access to level 1 certifications early on in that course sequence, so you can just start to develop that momentum and celebrate that progress.
All right, level 1 certifications. Can you give us like a couple of examples? I'm glad I'm not the only one that.
Well, we have, like Safe Serve, like if you're in the culinary arts, Safe Serve will be like one of those early certifications. CPR used to be one, but I don't think it's an industry-based certification. And we're down one man. We have someone that's ill and out, and that's Dr. Fannin. She's usually our CCMR guru. Okay. But I know Safe Serve is usually one for culinary, and CPR used to be one, but I think because everybody was taking advantage of it, no longer. Google Analytics, yeah, that's another.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm going to tap back into my principal brain for a second. Google Analytics is another level certification. Autodesk. Some of our pipeline work with our TA work and preparing the next phase of teachers to come in. So some of those are our level 1 certs that we're talking about.
To give a...
Oh,
you got perfect.
Hi, sorry.
Would you please?
Yeah.
Musical chairs. Expert.
Good evening. So some of our level 1 career certificates.
Give your name real quick.
Sure. Alex Duran, early college programs in the secondary schools office. So we have our baseline with our CTE programs under our director, Ms. Tammy Caesar, and so those are industry-based certs where students can earn those workforce skills and certifications during their high school. And then our level 1 are actually our higher ed. Equivalent to some of those programs. So we have like health science programs where students can get certifications in phlebotomy, some health science skills across the board. And so with our PTECs, what we like to do across the board is have students have 4-year sequence that would help with Goal 6, that sequence for CTE courses, earn an IBC, a level 1, and then also an associate's degree in that field.
Okay, so, and this is why I really wanted to kind of have this conversation, because I think about, again, like growing up in my neighborhood, and man, how cool would it have been to, let first of all, have those opportunities, and second of all, to make sure that students know, like, hey, by the time you finish high school, you can, have this certification. You can go out there and get a job, and not have to take on 4 years of college debt. So there was another question that I had. Oh, yeah. So thank you. I think that was, unless there's anything else to share, and I'm sure there's always something to talk about. And
No, I'll be available if any other questions come up.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. That's an example of next man up because I was like, where did Mr. Duran come from? So we are a couple people down right now, but thank you, Mr. Duran.
Always have people on the bench, right?
Right.
So my other question is about counselors and checking in with students, because I know, absolutely the goal and the vision, right, to have counselors be able to do that. And we also recognize that the reality is there's always more work than there are people to do it or time to do it. And so along those lines, I love hearing that, band directors and coaches are going out and talking to 8th graders. Y'all aren't going to be surprised by the next statement. What about high schoolers themselves? Like, I would rather listen to a peer, and this isn't just for adults, right? Like adults, children, teens, we listen to our peers more than we listen to people who we don't identify with, right? So those are two-pronged questions. One, y'all know counselors can't do it all. We know counselors can't do it all. So if there's any work on that side. And then the second question about high schoolers, talking to 8th graders.
So we did adjust the counselor job duties last year to make sure that 80% of their time was spent working directly with students. The other change with the course sheets is having the digital format and having a system so that, in the past, counselors collected their paper copies and then they'd spend weeks entering all the information. So having it digitally available so students enter it and the data is there saves weeks and weeks of work time so that they can spend their time working with students. In terms of the students, being the recruiters, I think that's a wonderful idea. And we'll share that with our principals to make sure they're thinking through, especially like right now with leveling, happening. The recruitment should happen in the spring so that students are choosing the courses so that the courses will make. And that's something that we need to be mindful of helping our principals, not just the counselors or the teachers, but students would be great recruiters. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Reach, you mentioned distinctions for some of the courses, and remind us, are those distinctions the kind of like the ropes that students wear when they're graduating? Is it certificates,
Yeah, well, those are definitely distinctions as well, but no, they're not the cords or the hoods that the students may have as part of their graduation. They're a distinction that goes on their transcript that says that they specialize within a certain area. So it may be business, it may be agriculture. There's multiple versions of them. Students can also get an advanced academics by doing any of those in addition to taking a certain number of AP or higher level courses. It was meant to provide an option above and beyond the standard graduation plan for those students who wanted to do more, but then they paused really and said, like, let's not just look at doing more, let's look at specializing in those things that students really enjoy. So it goes even above and beyond what we're talking here, where we're saying 3 or 4 courses. They're saying that, like, you specialized in art and science. And so you get that endorsement that actually goes on your transcript.
That's really neat. Now, is that a statewide thing, or is that something that it's a statewide
Yes, it's a
thing?
statewide.
Okay. Very cool.
Another example is the seal of biliteracy. That's endorsement. It shows up on their diploma.
Great. Okay. I have other questions about other items, but I'll let other trustees kind of chime in. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Trustees, other questions? Trustee Boswell and Trustee Singh.
I would love, just while we're talking about item goal 8, I have a few follow-up questions, and then I can defer to another trustee. Going back to whether we're measuring the right things, I know if what we're looking for is that sense of belonging, in a CTE sequence, it has to be courses. In certain areas, it has to be courses, but if we're looking for a sense of belonging, that you're doing theater for 4 years, you're doing, and athletics, a team for 4 years. It doesn't have to be a course. And I'm wondering if we're measuring, if what we're really trying to get to is that sequence and that sense of belonging, if course alone, if we might want to consider UIL participation as well, because you can be on a team without taking the course. And for many students, if you're trying to take 4 years of math or 4 years of science or 4 years of a language, you don't have room for 4 years of your art or of your sport, and yet you are still participating in a really deep and meaningful way. And I want to be sure we're not creating unintended consequences, that we're supporting what we want to support and incentivizing what we want to incentivize and measuring what we want to measure in a way that really aligns with the reality of our students and the choices they have in front of them. And that taking a class period is not always the very best way to measure that. So I would love to really consider that and see if that's a feasible thing to look at. I know not every sport is UIL, but I think that captures a broader look at what we're trying to get to. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I don't know if Coach Anderson is here, right? I know. Yeah, there he is. Certainly aware, especially I think back to, you don't have to be in theater to be in the play, right? It may happen that many of the kids who are in the play are also taking a theater course, but it's not a requirement. Mm-hmm. And that may not necessarily be UIL unless, of course, one act. But so we recognize that there are lots of different ways that kids can participate without actually being enrolled in a course. So I'd like to go back, speak with Coach Anderson, speak with our new fine arts director, and speak with Ms. Hanshin, who's helping us by what we are pulling from a transcript. Because currently, our process was to take these from a transcript so that we can ensure that we have a measure that's always going to be equal every time we look at it. By all means, we can look at, how are we more inclusive in what we include in there, but then we also want to consider, what is this going to mean for the person who's pulling it next year? Mm-hmm. And are we going to be able to quickly, in general, pull that data that we know is going to directly correspond to the year previous?
I appreciate that. And I know that UIL isn't a perfect net, that it misses people who are in the play but aren't doing the one act, for example. But I do think it's a net that expands this a little bit and reflects reality a little more closely, especially for athletics and some of the competitive fine arts. So thank you for that. I also would really appreciate when we talk about this measure as a board in our meeting, having a list of which schools have a 4-year sequence of things, where it's even an option to take 4 years of something, because I know we don't always do that well. And I would really love to see that data lined up also with feeder patterns and where we're double blocking in middle school, because that's a major pipeline issue. We know that that's a major pipeline issue. And when we're taking away those elective options in middle school to spend more time preparing for academic tests, kind of what are we gaining and what are we losing in that pipeline and in the opportunities we're offering our students, and really to have that deep conversation as a board and as a community, whether double blocking and those practices are necessarily the very best way to get our students what they need and ensure that they're getting a really rich experience and the academic support they need. And I know that's a longstanding practice, and I just want to be sure we're asking the right questions about it and looking at the outcomes over a long period of time for students. And then the final question that I have, there was before COVID some very strong fine arts equity work being done of a committee of fine arts administrators, teachers, community members, parents whose students were very involved with fine arts. I can't remember if there were students involved, but I was on the committee when it was happening, and it was extremely good work. And it was really looking at correlations between, if you follow a sequence of fine arts for 3 or 4 years, how it correlates with graduation rates, how it correlates with dropout rates. That if you bounce around and do several different things, the data shows one thing. If you do one and done and you get it out of the way, it shows another thing. And I would really love to consider whether we want to pick that work back up as we look at the role of arts in our district, and really be thoughtful about that. I know that, in the budget cuts, we did lose some arts programming. We did lose some arts teachers. We did consolidate, people are split between campuses. And I think part of that is a reflection of the fact that during COVID, people were less likely to do theater or marching band on Zoom. But I hope that we don't let that become an entrenched problem. And I really would like to be thoughtful about this going forward to make sure that those offerings stay strong. So thank you for looking at whether we can expand this measure. I appreciate that, and I will save any other questions for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Singh?
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I got to say, like, being on this board for 4 years, I feel like I have a better sense with the scorecard of how our district is doing than I ever have before, and I hope that's shared amongst the administration as well. I see some smiles and nods, so maybe, I don't know. But, so I appreciate the disaggregation. I think when I look at this, you know, I am concerned about what I see on slide 3. I feel like we really need to pause and look at goal 2, goal 3, and goal 4, and compare our targets with how the state did. And I think we've got to really spend a lot of time as a board contemplating this. And I appreciate that you mentioned that we would revisit our targets. But this is a little bit, it kind of shook me a little to see that 32, while we met our targets, which is good in a way, but when you see it relative to the state, I mean, 32% of our economically disadvantaged students were reading on grade level. That's about a third, which is, you know, this is no diss on our teachers, because I know that they've been working very hard. There's something systemically that we've got to take another look at if we're doing about 20 points or 20% less than the state. So, you know, it's 9 percentage points, but it's about 20% less than the state. And I feel like this needs to be like one of our top 3 priorities for the next month or two, President Rodriguez, in recalibrating our metrics, because we're going to start getting beginning of year data, and we have to make sure we're comparing that to a real target. And so we've got to up these targets. I think we set them too low. My suspicion was we were setting them too low when we voted on this. And, you know, I don't know what TEA did, but it seems to me like perhaps they've recalibrated a bit as well on their end. So we might need to consider making our targets relative targets, like relative to how the state is doing, rather than absolute numbers. So I would like to request that within the next month or so, I know we've got so much going on, I know, but I would really like, sometime this fall, I would like us to convene with a quantitative researcher, like somebody who has a PhD in quantitative research, and really figure out a way to come up with equitable, and I would say in partnership with Dr. Hawley's office, come up with goals that are measurable, that are stretching us, and that are relative to the state, because this is not good, y'all. We should not, I mean, I'm proud of the growth that we've shown on our campuses and everything like that, but what happened here? Everybody in the state experienced a pandemic. Everybody in the state experienced teacher shortages and teacher turnover. Why did AISD lag behind the state by like 20% in these 3 metrics? I don't know.
I have a theory, but it's just a theory.
So, one, again, we agree with you in terms of the targets, and so we've acknowledged that we will go back and revisit the targets. In terms of, you know, working with a qualitative researcher, I mean, again, any help we can have around, you know, making these appropriate, we can definitely explore it. In terms of the work, I think that you said it. I mean, you know, teachers, principals absolutely worked extremely hard to accomplish this. I think we talked about the significant growth that those campuses made. And yes, we did fall short of where the state was, but again, I think there's something to be said about the growth, and so, but we do have a ways to go, and I acknowledge that.
One other thing, just real quick, Trustee Singh, the question you're posing is a good one around whether our obviously our goals need to change because of the relative information that we have from the state. But are you also asking us to rethink about the goals we're doing? We're talking about the numbers, right? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. No, because it's a
increasing the target.
Yeah, and that's fine, but it's just a deep process that the board goes into a retreat and starts thinking about all of these things, like what is it that we're really trying to accomplish around these things. And so if it's I didn't say it's just the number. If it's the numbers, I think that there's obviously space to increase these because they've already been met, which has already been acknowledged. I think the other thing too is, and I'd love the administration to check, because I think as we have read some of the research that was going on, we made a conscious decision to choose to protect our staff and our students, and made sure that under COVID that we did things like we kept our masks on longer than a lot of other school districts. And there is some research that shows that because we didn't bring our kids in sooner, that there was an impact there. How much? Who knows? But I think that it'd be really interesting to just know what the context is of the question you mentioned about why the percentage is lower. And so we'll have to see what the theory is there. But I think it's important to make sure that we do that. And I appreciate the fall, because I know the trustees have told us that they don't want to be here till 2 o'clock in the morning. And the other challenge is, like, do we wait for the new board members? Do we do this now? And I think what we have done in the past is said, let's start the work and bring those trustees with us, or the trustee candidates with us, and making sure that the work continues on. But obviously the decisions can be made in December or January. Trustee White?
I don't disagree with any of the concern about where we are with our metrics comparison to the state. I very much would like to see us set the bar higher, but really the reason I raised my hand was to speak more to how we are able to support our administrative team in this work and getting to those goals, because I recognize that many times on this dais I hear that we are not necessarily ourselves modeling a culture of respect for our administrative teams, and so it's concerning to me that we have 3 strong professionals sitting in front of us, but we're questioning your judgment, or questioning your motives, or questioning your ability and want to move these metrics forward yourselves. And so I just want to make sure that we as a board recognize that we are here to not only provide governance and oversight in the work, but that we are also here to be able to support you all in doing the best work possible for our students. And everything that you have shown us is that you very much want to do that. So I think my question too as a board member is, how can we help you help our students?
So I will say that I remember in the discussion as we were setting the targets last year, we did look at historical data. So we looked at 16, 17, 17, 18 to see the growth. And so the data that Dr. Reach shared earlier, there was a 2% growth in both reading and math from 17, 18, and the 16, 17, there was only like a 1-point growth. So as we were thinking anything above that, and that was prior to the pandemic. And so if historically we were only making a 1 or 2 point growth, we wanted to set some challenging but attainable goals. And now, being that we're back in person, last year we did start the fall with most of our little ones still at home, and those are the foundational, years. And so learning virtually, that did impact the growth in our students. And Austin was unique that we did that in the fall virtually. So I think that we're certainly open to revisiting the goals now that we have some baseline data, and the systems that we've put in place are now in year 2 with the classroom observations, the data, the PLCs, and making sure that progress is personalized for every student. Like that's really like kind of hit home to, okay, every student has a starting point. How do we help them grow? And I think last year we talked about it, and it was kind of the first year that we really did that. And there was a lot of, are they really looking at my percent passing or the percent of students growing? And I think that that's hit home because every month we talk about both, how many are on grade level and the percent of students that are meeting growth targets. And adding the MAP data to our SLO data for teachers is also, all of our systems are aligning so that we're all moving in the same direction. So we do anticipate seeing accelerated growth, but I welcome the conversation about let's set these targets so that they are challenging and attainable. Yeah.
May I
Yeah,
continue
sorry.
what I was saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that, and I want to be very clear that our role as trustees is to set these targets. It's our responsibility to set these numbers. And if we don't speak up and show this, that we're driving this, that we want this, then things may not happen, and then we end up sitting here with the same historic gaps that we've had for decades. And so, Trustee Wagner, could you please explain to me what about that is bothering you so much, and why you're attributing my intentions when we're not really even that close? How do you know my intentions for what I'm saying publicly?
I don't want to get too far off our agenda because I know
Okay, then maybe you shouldn't have
there,
accused me of something if you're not ready to defend it. So I'll just move on to my next point.
Well, if I could respond, please, before you do. And that is just simply to say that we can hold a very high standard. I share your concern for our very high standards. I share your concern for our oversight of those high standards. But what I don't share is sitting on this dais and trying to insinuate that we have reputable staff members in front of us that don't.
That right there is you think you know me, and you just don't. You just don't.
I'm listening to the words that you said.
Don't say I'm trying to do anything. Okay, all I'm saying is that if we are really going to make good targets here and come up with good numbers, none of us on this dais has the expertise to do that. But I know enough to say we need somebody who lives in data, who knows how to do this. There are statistical methods that unless you have a PhD in quantitative research, you probably don't know what they are. So that's what that was all about. But I'm going to move, and accountability and is not this equivalent to disrespect. So, but I'm going to move on to talking about Goal 12, which is the staff satisfaction. Dr. Reach, or actually Dr. Mays, when are we going to actually decide and finalize which questions we're using, and have we heard from all the trustees on which questions we're going to be used? Have we narrowed that down at all?
So I think today that conversation was supposed to take place. I think that Dr. Reach had put some mechanisms in place to get feedback from trustees, but I'll allow him to kind of extend on it.
So when we did create a survey, I did not receive any input on that. I had received input from Trustee Singh on some of the indicators. I know that she had also discussed possible how they could be weighted, and I don't think we discussed that. But some indicators that could be included, I did not receive other feedback. We did have a conversation with Panorama yesterday, and we had a few trustees join us to where we did talk through some of what they've seen and the process that they shared with us on how we could kind of talk about what are we looking at, what do we see from that, and what do we wonder comes from that to help us with goal setting. So at this moment on this indicator, I don't feel that I've received a lot of input for it, but certainly open to what could be used, whether it's the section, the subsection from there, or some combination of questions or something different.
I think what I hear is a little bit of homework for the board members to get back to you, and also potentially do at least a small group meeting if needed to get the responses that we need by the time we get to the board voting meeting. Yes?
And if I may, I was in the small group meeting and asked some questions about it. I had the time that it worked with my schedule, and I left the meeting feeling pretty confident that the idea of using Panorama's cluster of measures to look that correlate with climate and culture made some sense. And what they discussed is that we could use that cluster to measure, and then each campus could find an item within to really focus on to improve their campus scores. There was real logic to it. There was a system for reporting back to our community how the data is being used, which I know has not always been a strength that we've had. So I left that conversation with a little more clarity for what that's worth. And I thought it was valuable. It does tie us to a proprietary product. And I think that's something we need to think about, whether that is or isn't something that we're committing to. Because if we lose the service, we lose the data. But it was a very illuminating conversation that showed a really clear path forward on how to use it at the district level and the campus level and report back to our community.
That's great. Can you just clarify one thing? Like, I think one of the things for the board members as you talk to them, Dr. Reach, is what I'm not a PhD in quantitative analytics or statistics, but what I do know as a user of data is that it's really important to have a clarity about what it is that we're trying to accomplish with the goal, with the data. And so the causation piece and the correlation piece, much more the correlation than causation. Correlation, what is it that we're trying to get at? And I think if we can get unanimity, maybe that's not the right word. I was thinking about the bond vote, getting nine trustees to agree on something, but if we can get some consensus around what it is that we're trying to accomplish, that would help with that whole cluster piece. Because I hear the logic in that, and I would support that. It's just like, what are we trying to get out of it? What is it that we're trying to measure? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be really important for our team to understand from the board.
I think that's where the conversation was in terms of, for us, we were comfortable using, what Panorama has, but there was a desire to look at something, I guess, that would yield something different. And so that's where we needed guidance from the trustees to give us direction in that area. So we're all ears.
And I think my one takeaway from my meeting with them yesterday is that they were looking at campus level, and I think looking at both campus level and district level, because they show us two different things. And I think families interact largely with the campus level, but employees really interact with both in a way, and that's something we might look at. But they have measures that kind of have a list of factors that they put together in a formula, and I left convinced by the people who are quantitative experts that there was a real logic to it and a way to use it as a tool that we could translate to our communities. So the conversation was very helpful.
And this is a great conversation because at some point when I was here 5 years ago, trustee saying it was 4 years ago, the idea that we have an actual system that can measure at the district-wide level, go down to the campus, and then go back up, which then holds transparency and accountability in that system is really important. I think the one question I know that it triggers in my mind, and it probably goes to Dr. Reach or Dr. Mays, is if we're going to use this proprietary data set, do we have a contract with this organization that is aligned to the scorecard and the dates we have? Because I think we go to 2024, 2025.
Yeah, we currently do not. We have a contract that has 2 more years on it, and we have 4 years remaining on the scorecard at the moment.
Yeah. So that's just an outstanding question for you all, for the administration to kind of resolve or figure out. Do we use an alternative tool? Is there something else that is out there, or how do you transition that? I don't know, Trustee Singh, Trustee Boswell and I took up some of your time there, so
I appreciate that, and part of the reason I just want to share that I'm bringing up the importance of having this quantitative research is we don't have a DRE department anymore, and typically they have helped us in all of this work, and so that's why I'm saying, like, we can't forget that role. And so I am curious at some point to hear how we're filling that. You don't have to tell me right now, but we've got to keep in mind that we're working in numbers, we're swimming in numbers. And so we got to make sure we've got the expertise at that high level that we used to have.
Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Foster, did you want to speak? You haven't spoken yet, so I just want to make sure.
Oh, and all I would share at this point is just that I'm, generally satisfied with the, basically the progress of the district and I guess the board by extension in terms of the development and the refinement of the scorecard over time. I think there's been just really great progress that makes it so much easier to engage and to really see what's going on. And in our case, including understanding what we're not doing well yet. And one of the things that I've been steadily impressed about and by is that this board, this administration, has embraced the uncomfortable realities and leaned into them. And that's the only way we're going to kind of get anywhere. Now we've done that piece. So now it's on to the next. And the next is to actually affect the changes that the analyses, the data, then the analyses showed us that we need to make. So I get scared, not scared, but the piece about the comparison to state level data, I never want to be in second, fourth, or 92nd place out of however many districts there are. I never want us to, on aggregate, be doing worse than than the state on average. So I like and appreciate seeing the state numbers there. And I would like us, boy, this is going to sound so haughty, but I want us to do better than the aggregate because of the intellectual resources in our city and the love and dedication of our families and parents. I know we can that we can get there. At the same time, going back to this whole thing about quantitative analyses, like the devil's in the details and parsing things out. I don't know the fabric of the state to fully understand what a state level number means because a rural district over here has some stuff going on. A border district has, all of these districts have these different things going on. So, one of the questions that I actually have, it's like, well, let's do more data. Has this gap existed over time? And it's been with us for about 80 years? Or, well, we haven't been tracking things that well for that long. But have these gaps been persistent? And again, as Trustee Singh would say, don't need to answer this now, but something for us to look at, basically understand what a state number means versus what a district number means as we come to conclusions. So even if we might lag, it could be because we're not there yet and we can get there, or it could be that there's something particular about the fact that we welcome refugees from around the world and we have students who are first stop, first time in country, and that creates circumstances. Or we could, and I'm just pulling things out of the air as to what the possibilities are. But there might be reasons, which won't be a reason to accept it, but it will be something that we account for and move forward. So I guess what I'm saying is I want the state level data consistently included, and I would love to see it longitudinally to the extent that we can do that. And then I want to keep holding us accountable. And I am of the steadfast opinion that we are not where we need to be yet in terms of our numbers. But I have complete faith in the administration in terms of getting there. And I will support you any way I can in helping us get there.
Dr. Bates, did you have
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. And like you said, I think that there's always nuance there. I mean, we get a chance to see it, compare it from major urban district to major urban district. And like you said, the data can get granular in a number of different ways. And I think that it would probably be helpful if we shared some of that data with you all just to give you even more context, because I agree there's all sorts of ways to look at this data.
Dr. Bates, as you share the data, there's one thing that Dr. Oster reminded me was if you all could share the longitudinal study from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board about 8th graders in our particular region, I think that has been a foundational piece for me about the burning desire to break systems intentionally with the goals that we have set. That longitudinal study shows that 8th graders that started with us, I can't remember like whatever the year was, 8 years ago or so, that after a number of years after graduation from high school, 15% of African American and 15% of Hispanics go on to get a 2-year degree or higher. That means that 85% of Black and Hispanic students in our region here aren't getting there. And so that's why our goals are so important around this, and the correlation to it is as well. So it'd be great to reshare that. And I know that data gets updated as we go along. So that would be a really good foundational piece of data for our board members. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Trustee Basil.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's really powerful data, and it really does show where kids go when they leave us, and how well we're keeping our promise to prepare for college, career, and life, and that arm of it. And I want to say, Trustee Foster, yeah, I want us to do better than the state, and I think the questions about why we aren't are important. So I have a question for the administration. That as trustees, we set the goals, and you set the goal progress measures. I do really appreciate the reflection of state numbers here. I know in the presentations you give us on scorecard items, you often include something about how we're doing at the state, but I wonder if it's worth considering on goals 1 through 5, adding, or maybe all of our goals, adding that state number as a goal progress measure so that we are talking about it each and every time and really keeping our eye on that number and asking ourselves those why questions. So if that's something that we might consider as a way to keep track of that in a very systematic way. And you don't have to answer it now if you don't have an answer now, but.
Well, the only consideration would be, since we use MAP growth as our goal progress measures, I don't know that the whole state of Texas is using it, so I don't know that it would be an apples-to-apples comparison.
But maybe it could just be that once a year when we look at that end goal, that we're also considering that GPM for the yearly data, because we know that is apples to apples, and we can look at students with economic disadvantage. If there's a way that we can actually reflect these numbers that we're seeing today in that GPM, that maybe we look at just once a year when the data is available. So I'd love to consider that. Yeah. And then I want to just kind of take that state local, and there was a Texas Tribune article this past week that looked at districts in, we often ask which campuses are our outliers. And there was a Texas Tribune article that looked at districts in Texas that are outliers, that have large percentages of students with economic disadvantage, and that are on the other side of these state averages, that are doing much better than the state average for students with economic need. And they went and talked to people in those districts about what they believed their why was. And a lot of them are students in deep South Texas, near the border, in the valley. And the answers were things like, we have a community schools model. We do an excellent job of signing our children up for free and reduced price lunch. We have culturally responsive lesson plans. We take care of the whole child. We engage parents deeply. And I think that really brings us back to the question locally. I would love to do a better job each and every time we're looking at figuring out with the students with economic disadvantage, where are we doing better? And what can we learn from those campuses where we, in our own city, much more locally, are breaking those patterns, and what can we learn from that? And I think that's a gap in what we've been doing, and we are a big data organization, and I think we have a great deal to learn from campuses that are breaking these patterns right here at home. So, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lula? Any other? If not, thank you all very much. And trustees, thank you. Well, and also the administration should say thank you for taking part in a shared commitment to students and student outcomes. We're going to now move on to our information reports and updates. And Dr. Mays, before you introduce the next item, I just want to remind our trustees that tonight we may just need to ask for a hall pass, because I think as you noticed, Trustee Wagner had to pause the meeting because two of us stepped off the dais, so we're a little short today, so just had a little flashback to middle school around hall passes.
So I believe our next item is Mr. Ramos, and so as we've heard you all loud and clearly, we do want to make sure that we are planning and designing for engagement around our budget, and so I know Mr. Ramos and Office of Equity have been hard at work around really looking at our budget calendar and talking through ways that we can make our budget processes more equitable. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Ramos.
President Rodriguez, Dr. Mays, members of the board. So as part of our budgeting process, one of the items that we are tasked as an administrative team, as a staff, is to create a budget development calendar for consideration and board adoption. And so before you, we will go over a draft budget development calendar for consideration at our September regular board meeting. As far as what governs, what makes up, or what is in this calendar, we have several specific codes and guidelines that we have to abide by. So that includes the Texas Education Code. We also look at our current CE legal and CE local codes, which basically states that the superintendent or designees shall develop a budget development calendar for consideration and for board adoption and approval. Also, as part of the budget development calendar, the fiscal year that we use, of course, is our current fiscal year, which is July 1st through June 30th. So that is taken into account when we look at our overall calendar. So some of the key dates with the calendar that you have before you, that you have it in board docs as a draft. Last year's budget calendar had 25 items on the overall calendar. This budget development calendar has 43 entries. Most of those are key dates as far as at a high level with regards to the board statutory requirements that we have that we're governed by under the Texas Education Code. We also have a timeline for board agenda items, what we will be bringing to the board during the budgeting process. And then one of the new items that we added throughout the development calendar is community outreach. And the reason for that is we really give large importance to equity in our processes. And so we saw that that worked very well with the Bond 22 development and package that was presented and ultimately approved by the board. So we wanted to make sure that this year we really take a deeper dive into the budget equity by design model and take that into account and incorporate that as part of our budgeting tool as well. So in the month of September, the large important items that you see before you are the budget adoption of this calendar. Also, you will receive a first reading at our September board meeting. We will adopt a tax rate at the September board meeting, and then we will adopt and recommend a recapture option, which we are governed under House Bill 3. October, we will begin releasing district and program budgets throughout the district so that departments can begin the budget building process. November and December, here's where you see a big change as compared to last year. We will begin community outreach. The form that will take place early on with this calendar is we will begin having conversations with campus advisory committees throughout the district and kind of give them an idea of some of the items that we would be looking at as a district, some of our priorities, some of our preliminary budget assumptions, and then ask them also for input and guidance on historically what have they seen that has worked at their campuses and what have they been without. So we want to start that conversation early on so that when we begin the overall community presentations with their overall communities, they have had a chance and an opportunity to have those conversations among themselves and their community. So that by the time we give our presentations and our recommendations and look for their input, they've had those conversations as well, and they are prepared. January, campus budgets will be released, so we will be releasing campus budgets to all our principals. Our first monthly update will take place at our January board information session. And so the goal is to have a budget update at every information session, beginning with January, running through June. So that's making sure that every month we have a budget discussion with our board, given updates on how the equity process is coming along, as well as giving updates on what we are hearing from our communities. The Equity by Design community outreach also begins in January. That process will run January through April. And then we will discuss in the January board info session our preliminary budget assumptions that we are making our estimates and planning as a district. Those will include our projected enrollment, what we think our property values will look like, as well as our staffing ratios and guidelines. We will go over those specific assumptions that we are looking at as a district. In the month of April, the district will receive our preliminary certified values from the Travis Central Appraisal District. That will allow us to estimate what we think we will receive in overall local tax collections. The board also in April, we will, as a goal, have a consultation agreement that we will bring before the board. That will include compensation and health plans that we will have conversations throughout this process with our consultation groups. One of the things that to note with this specific item is our goal is to have a consultation agreement ready to go by April. But we also have to keep in mind that this is going to be a legislative session, and so sometimes that does affect our timeline, so we will keep a close eye on the conversations that are happening at the legislative level. And the reason I state that is if, let's say, the legislature does increase a per-student allotment, and if for some reason it includes additional pay, let's say for teachers, sometimes the way they write the legislative law is that if we as a district have adopted any compensation agreement before that takes effect, then we have to do both. And so we want to make sure that we are complying with the legislative intent and as a district. Also, in April, we will present our preliminary budget, which will include general, food service, and debt service funds. So that will be our preliminary budget. You will see preliminary numbers that we are looking at in April. In May, again, based on community input, staff input, district-wide input, we will present a recommended budget in the month of May at the May info session. And then in June, we will have final budget presentations to the board, which will include a presentation at the board information session. It would also include a public meeting, of course, to adopt the budget and the tax rate in late June. And so we're hoping that by having a monthly conversation on the budget, it will allow us the opportunity to have the important conversations not only with our community, but with our board as well, as we discuss different topics throughout that process. And then the board officially adopts the 23-24 budget by June 30th, which is our statutory deadline. Next slide. And so this is kind of one of the goals that we want to stress this year that we really didn't have an opportunity to dive into last year, which is the equity by design process. And so we want to really make sure that we incorporate this into our budget plan and our budget development cycle. So we are working with the Equity Office to see what that's going to look like. Back in, I believe it was 2018-19, the Equity Office did have a budgeting toolkit, and so we are going to look at that original toolkit based on the goals that we have as a district. How do we tweak that to our current goals and objectives and move forward with that process? The goal is to have the Equity Department also assist us with training our community and giving a real ultimate goal as far as how we involve and how can we include these equity discussions in how we ultimately finalize our budget. And so as part of the budgeting process, our goals are to really incorporate the equity by design in our budgeting process. Again, this is a deep dive that we want to make sure that we do this year. We didn't have an opportunity to do that last year simply because of the challenges of the pandemic, as well as the budgeting reductions that we had to really streamline as a district as a result of our over-projection of our enrollment. Then we want to continue to expand transparency. Some of the recommendations that I've heard are continue to provide reports not only at a campus level, but at a district level, where our public understands what our numbers mean. And so our budget is a large budget. It's $1.8 billion, but presented in a format that our community members understand. So what do these numbers actually mean? How are we actually funding not only our district, but our campuses? And so we actually took a step in that direction with our campus budget one-page sheets. We have, as a district, purchased a software tool called AlaView, and basically what that does is that incorporates data that we have through our finance system and helps us create the reports that we're looking for, breaking it down on a per campus funding basis as a district, looking at our staffing, how do we staff as a district. So this tool will allow us to really present this information in a much more user-friendly method for our community. We also, our goal is to receive district-wide feedback through our community outreach, really look to our committees for recommendations, whether those are the DAC committees, the CACs, the long-range planning committees, and so really talk to these committees and kind of receive feedback on what they're hearing from our constituents, from our communities with regards to our budget. And then approve a compensation package in April with the caveat that it is a legislative session, so we will be watching that timeline very closely. Also, as part of the goals, we want to review our per-student funding, really look at our staffing funding allocation formulas. And so we have, as a district, formulas in how we fund our campuses, but we've never really looked at the equity tool, the equity by design model, and kind of taken a deep dive. Is that the best way for us to fund our campuses and our district? So we will be looking at all formulas throughout the district and how we fund departments and campuses. We are going to review our historical spending, and the importance with that is we want to really take a deep dive into our data and look at where we spend our funds and compare ourselves to other urban districts throughout the state, especially the urban districts that really look similar to us, because our goal is to maximize how we spend our budgeting dollars, how efficient that we can be as a district, so that we could funnel those budget savings to our compensation, to our teachers, to our instructional costs. So that's a deep dive that we will do as a district and as an administrative team. We're also going to aggressively look at investing in compensation, and that is because that is a reality that we face as a district. With the cost of living in the Austin area just continuing to skyrocket, with stiff competition among the suburban districts compared to what we pay as a district, that issue is not going to go away regardless of our budget situation. So what can we do as a district to streamline our processes, our expenditures, to make sure that we continue to invest in our employees and retain our employees for years to come? Again, as part of that process, propose a balanced budget similar to what we did this year. In the 21-22 school year, we will finish with a balanced budget. So we finished with a balanced budget last year. We recommended a balanced budget this year, and the goal is to continue that process to make sure that we maintain our financial stability as a district. And then advocate for education funding at the legislative level. And so this is going to be very key as part of this process. We know that the state of Texas will be working off of a $27 billion budget surplus. And so there is an opportunity to advocate for an increase to the per student allotment, per student spending. That would not only benefit Austin ISD, but districts throughout the state. We are going to advocate for a discount when we pay our recapture payment early. We are going to be aggressive with that ask at 10%. So for us, that translates to $86 million that we are able to keep as a district to invest in our employees and our district. And with that being said, any questions from the board?
Thank you. Dr. Mays, anything?
No, I just want to continue to emphasize our goal at increasing the amount of engagement. I mean, again, we know that we had a lot of conversations last year around budget, particularly at the end of the year, but we wanted to be able to start to have those conversations early on, to be able to have plenty of opportunities to refine and dialogue and get to a place where we could all have the consensus that we desire when we vote on our final product.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions? Trustee Boswell.
I have some questions. I appreciate so much the presentation, the commitment to giving us a presentation every month, starting in January, not just for the board, but for the community. I really think that's a huge step in the right direction. Appreciate the commitment to finding ways to translate the budget into meaningful information for people who are not CPAs and who may not speak data, numbers, but who understand that numbers also tell us a story. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Really want to say thank you again for that campus level data. And I know we heard a caller tonight suggest that on every campus website, there's a link to the campus budget and the district budget, which I thought was a great idea just in making things accessible to people. Not everyone's digging into the AISD website to find our budget, but lots of people go to their campus websites. I see some things that aren't on the calendar that were last year, and just some questions from other prior years, because I know this is done a little bit differently every year. Last year, we did have an annual review of partnerships and measurement of outcomes that was listed on our calendar. I don't see that. Can you help me understand that choice?
So that report was actually done by a department that is no longer in existence. But we are working, and I am working with staff to actually come up with a report that we are able to give to the board, basically to look at the contracts that we invest in as a district, and are we receiving the outcomes that we are expecting as a district as a result of those contracts. So that is a report that's coming. It will probably come in the January timeframe as we begin the budgeting process. I think it's important to have that information and give that to the board so that we can start looking at the numbers that we as a district invest in and where we spend our funds.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to just put something out there. We've had in the past some community budget review committees that did work helping to shape it, similar to our bond steering committee, our long range planning committee, and would love to just put that out there as something to consider, that we engage people in a formal way, in addition to the equity by design work that's already contemplated and planned with our CACs, kind of broad and deep at the same time. And I think there's a role for people who really are interested in going deep, kind of line by line, and really looking deeply at what we're doing, the choices we're making, and how that aligns, and offering some guidance to us about that. And I know in the past the board has had some roles at different places, either approving a staffing formula or setting kind of vision, kind of sharing what our priorities, our main focus areas that we hope the budget will be shaped around. Not that we're here to dictate the work that I know needs to come from every single department in the district, but I think at that vision level, really having a role before something's put in front of us and we're asked to just approve it. I think it's been very top down for the past 2 cycles. I personally have been very dissatisfied with that, and not only for our community, but as a board, we've been shown something and asked to kind of rubber stamp it rather than co-creating something with our community. So I appreciate the pieces of that we can work into this, and I'm seeing less of that than I would like to see. And then another thing that I think has some value, Texas puts us up against a wall that we have to have this done by June, and we know our tax rates don't come. We really have this very narrow needle to thread. But I know in the past there has been a preliminary budget presented to the board. The board has discussed it. The administration came back with a revised budget based on that. that was used to make the recommended budget then that came into that voting meeting. And I think the timeline we have limits what we can do, but I think that might be a way to kind of find a balance, give our community a little more chance to respond so we're not stuck navigating something that's come to us in a final meeting that we haven't had time to really engage the community and each other in discussing together.
The goal with having budget presentations on a monthly basis at the information meetings is to make sure that by the time we get to the June vote, there's no surprises, and especially the board understands exactly what is in the budget and what specifically we will be voting on. So that is the ultimate goal. That's the big change that we did this year.
So the goal is for those monthly presentations to be that back and forth dialogue with the board, the administration, and the community.
Correct.
For
And
that
based
to be
on the
baked into
feedback
that.
that we're hearing from the community.
Thank you. I
and our
appreciate that.
committee
That helps to
members.
clarify that. All right. That's it for me. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that for just a second? If you don't- So I just want to, because I think I share some of the similar kind of comments, Trustee Boswell, but I just want to make sure I'm putting it down as, like, from a board governance perspective. I think the how we did the bond steering committee work, I mean, it was helpful to me for the board to have a visioning session with the staff before we ever engaged on the bond steering committee piece. So that kind of gave a vision or parameters or guardrails, and then you did community engagement. I think options for what that community engagement would be really helpful right now, because obviously this doesn't start until January, so I have a little bit of time. And then I'm also mindful of the fact that we've got new trustees that are coming in, and then obviously a superintendent search that will take up some majority of, not a majority, but just a lot of the board's time. And then the third piece is this whole idea that I think individual trustees, but I also wanted to make sure and laid it out for the rest of the trustees, is maybe potentially having deep dive of 3 of our priorities, just given the staff resources of what we're doing. And those 3 areas, I think it'd be great to hear from all the trustees. I think as we've talked, it's pretty clear: special education, bilingual education, and what was it? Dual language, special education, and mental health. Thank you. Mental health seem to rise up to the 3 kind of deep dives around the budget. But I also just want to hear from other trustees about that effort, because I think we've had some individual conversations, but obviously need to have the majority of the board speak. And I'll just turn it over to Trustee Lou.
So you stole my thunder, but I appreciate that you stole my thunder. No,
My
it's
apologies.
perfect. I'd rather you say it than not. Yeah, I really love the idea of, potentially doing like some sort of visioning session ahead of time with the board, and also really love that idea of doing deep dives on, however it is that we collectively decide what our top 3s or whatever the number might be, not 20, but a smaller number to do a deep dive. And the other thing, which is related to some of the data that we've been looking at, and I mentioned this a few times, but probably more recently regarding staff leveling. So I appreciate, again, like that's on the table as far as looking at, what makes sense. How does the district provide budgets for campuses? And kind of going back to Trustee Singh's comment about the, PhD in quantitative. I'm going to have to memorize that phrase now. So both that and the fact that the Department of Research and Evaluation, which was around for, decades? Long time. I think, and again, kind of a conversation for the board and the administration to have, like, there are certain investments that no longer exist, and that might make sense. But what I'm starting to sense, and what I was worried about before, is that when you lose a department like the DRE, it actually ends up making it harder for the administration and the board to make decisions that are fully informed by data.
So we know that losing DRE, of course, is a handicap. And so for the area with CCMR, we're working with E3 Alliance to conduct that programmatic evaluation. We're also working with the University of Texas to kind of supplement some of those areas where we know we have gaps, but we definitely know that there's a need for that capacity within our organization. But given the circumstance, we're working to contract that out. That conversation is pretty early. I think the conversation with E3 and what we're doing with CCMR, that's pretty much moving along pretty well. But for the other aspects of, again, program evaluation and support in the way that we need it, we're still early in the stages of that conversation.
Oh, you know what? One other comment. Community engagement. So I would love to, in future presentations, I would love to kind of hear what are some non-traditional ways that information is getting out to parents that are working, parents and guardians, and community members who may not be tracking all of this closely or may have other pressing issues to look at. So now the first thing that pops to my mind is like, oh, okay, if somebody hands me, something short and small, has pictures, y'all have heard me say this before, it has pictures, has the point, then, if a parent is running between two jobs, or if a parent is dealing with like a 2-year-old over here, a surly 13-year-old over there, trying to get dinner on the table, and I swear if the phone rings, right, really channeling and thinking about our community and how do we get the information out to them, because even if they may not then come to us with information, for me, that's us living our value, right? That we're providing information out, that we're letting people know, like, this is what's coming for the district, this is what's coming for your campus. So I would love to see those kinds of updates provided.
Thank you. Trustee Singh.
So, Mr. Ramos, thank you so much for presenting. I feel heard, and I feel like you really did make you and your team really have thought about the transparency that's so important to our community. So thank you for actually putting that word in one of your slides, because I think that was a sticking point for me personally in the last go round. And so I think one of the things I wanted to just ask you, Dr. Mays, is how is the staff analyzing our investments to see if we are getting a high academic return on investment?
Yeah, I think traditionally we've taken the program reports that have been provided to us and leveraged those. The challenge is that there's not necessarily consistency in terms of what we're looking for. And so the conversations that we've been engaged in, and some individual trustees I've had conversations with you all, is about challenging the organizations that we choose to partner with to make sure that they have metrics that are aligned with, our scorecard outcomes and things that we've decided are our goals for the entire organization. Again, early in the conversations, because we work with a number of organizations, and so that conversation is taking place one organization at a time. But for each conversation we have, we're putting that challenge before each group. And then we have had conversations with Dr. Holly about, ways that we can kind of make it more standard for each organization that we work with. And so, again, we're still in the early stages of that. I would also say, to the point of transparency, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the goal is always to be transparent. I think that at times, the way we've traditionally gone about, budget processes within a school district, it may lend itself to appearing as if you're not trying to be transparent, but I think that the goal is always to be transparent, and I did want to just try to make sure we emphasize that. So
I really appreciate that. And I still recall having sort of a community conversation in partnership with the ACPTA. And Ed, you were just so willing to accommodate the long list of requests that came out of that. But I think that did go a long way in building trust. And so I know that you said you'd be getting campus budgets out to principals in January. Is it going to be kind of similar to what you did last time after the conversation, so that every campus could see like what they're getting, what sources?
And now they'll have their one-page summary sheet so that they could actually dive into what does my budget look like in a snapshot.
Okay,
And so
great.
they'll have that tool as well.
Thank you. And I know that there's been some interest from the community on getting delineation of money that's coming in from other sources, like booster clubs and, private donors. Is that something that you also are tracking, or?
So that's going to be a challenge because as a district, we can't obligate outside entities to provide us with certain information. We can make the ask, but as far as do they have to provide it, that's going to depend on the organization itself. So we can try our best to receive that data,
Okay.
and then we'll see how we fare with that.
Is that something that we could get from principals?
It's going to depend on the type of organization, because usually they have their own boards, they're separate entities, they're closely affiliated with the school district. We can't even include their financials with our financial statements, and so we have to be careful with what we ask them, because if we incorporate them as an extension of the ISD, then we actually have to include their financials in our financials as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. The other thing was, I remember one of the best presentations I feel like we've had as a board was when it was when strategic staffing was first introduced, and Dr. Elizalde kind of went through and showed all the different formulas and all of that. I would really love to see something like that happen. And maybe it's already on here, and I kind of didn't notice that, but is that going to be, are we going to get that?
So we're hoping to have that presentation as part of the January presentation.
Okay.
So we can have those discussions early on in the process.
And that's the kind of thing, so somebody had mentioned the bond steering committee and how, do y'all remember, was it only a month ago when we approved the bond, how much scrutiny we gave to what every single campus is getting in terms of HVAC and this and that? I would love for us to get to a point where we're giving that level of scrutiny to staffing, where we actually understand, because staffing that's our meat and potatoes, right? That's what we do, is we provide staffing to help students. And that's where I feel like I'm hearing a lot. I feel like we've made great strides in being more equitable in our staffing. But until we really look case by case at each campus, and I know you do that as a staff, but I don't think it filters back to us. I would love to have an understanding of how that happens, campus by campus. Again, maybe not this year, but that's something that I would like for us to kind of think about in the future. And then just revisiting the ROI, the academic return on investment thing. I would like us to have a presentation on that. What did you learn? It sounds like you are making some movement. Hopefully we can build on the DMG report that we spent about $200,000 on a couple of years ago. I want to kind of see the result of that work. Maybe by then we'll have some of the equity assessment done. I don't know, but I want to see how that plays into all of this as well. And are we following the recommendations from these commissioned reports? I want to see the lines drawn. I'm sure you guys are looking at them, and I'd be very curious to do that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Singh. I was reminded by our legal counsel that Trustee Zapata has now joined us online, so I wanted to make sure and give her an opportunity to ask any questions around the budget, but also was reminded by legal counsel that, our board counsel, that we still need to have 5 in person for a quorum. So just as a reminder. Trustee Zapata, do you have a question? Questions?
My question is, good evening, everyone. Sorry I'm not there. My question is around community engagement, because I hear I hear that we have a lot of concerns on how information is getting out to parents, and but we don't have a big staff in community engagement to do that work. Number one. Number two, we still have a lot of schools that are understaffed. So I know it's important, but I don't want our academic people to be so, we have to be realistic. And really, I think our focus is for them to be focused on academics and how can we, and this is to the community, what can you do to bring a group of people with you to help get the word out to families, to begin building that community safety net that can communicate to the families? Because no matter what they do, robocalls, I mean, they've been doing it all. I've been visiting my principals and I've been talking to parents, and it doesn't matter how much, how hard, it's still parents. We aren't going to be able to get a lot of the parents who are right now focused on still basic survival needs. And so I just, I don't want to keep pushing our staff to do something that they are doing everything. Our staff, our principals, amazing office staff, everyone is going above and beyond, and we're still not reaching everyone, and we're not because they can't do it alone, and we need to work with the community to help in that area because it's one-on-one conversations, it's talking to your neighbors, and it's doing that, and our schools cannot do that. We don't want them to waste their time doing that. I want them to make sure they're prepared at preparing our kids for learning. So I don't know on the budget how much is invested in community engagement because it's huge. That's a lot of work, and we don't have a lot of staff to do that work. And I don't want to burn out our staff right now because right now there's a lot of time invested on informing everyone about the bond. I mean, that should be our priority, and I'm doing everything I can to be part of that to ensure that people know about the bond so that we can get that bond passed. So I think we have to pick what is our priority in this budget, and so that we don't bombard our schools with so many asks that we're going to miss the opportunity to pass a bond that we need passed. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Zapata. Trustee Lugo?
So thank you, Trustee Zapata, for sharing that feedback. I think it's always good to kind of have a balance of, what do we aspire to, but what are some of the constraints? And as I was hearing the comments about, information getting out to the community regarding the bond, I actually think it perfectly dovetails with budget information, right? Because a lot of times people, whether it's parents, teachers, community members at large, we don't have a sense of, but why can't you just fix it, right? Or why can't you just pay for this? And it's a lot more complicated than that. And so I think, even starting to think about how do we piggyback on to some of the outreach that's being done? Who are the partners that we already have out in the community who can amplify? I think of in organizational change management, we often call them change advocates or ambassadors. And so kind of the same thing with community outreach, who are your ambassadors so that you can multiply and not have, because I absolutely agree with Trustee Zapata, everybody's overworked, not enough time, too few people, but I know we can be really creative, and to the extent that the board can support and help the administration, I hope y'all will call on us to do that.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Trustees, any other comments on this item? If not, thank you all very much. I think Dr. Reach or Mr. Ramos, if there's a way to survey our trustees around those priority items to do the deep dives. That might be a good way of capturing all the input from our colleagues, especially those that can't make it tonight. So this, thank you, Mr. Ross. This ends the section on the information reports from the administration. And at this time, we're now going to move into the preview of the upcoming regular board agendas. This will allow the public and trustees the opportunity to review the agenda items that will be considered for a vote at the next regular board meeting. AISD staff is available to answer any question for tonight's preview. And we'll begin tonight with item 7, which is the agenda preview for upcoming board administration items. Trustees, are there any questions on these items? I know I have 2 comments on this one, but I want to make sure Sure.
Yeah, I want to share the culture of voting. Just would love updates or information. I know Texas law, one of my favorite Texas laws, requires schools to share voter registration information with eligible students who are turning 18. And I know every single year for a very long time, there are always high schools who need to be reminded that it's not only okay to do that, that is a nonpartisan, we hope non-controversial thing that we do as a district, preparing students for college, career, and life. But it's also required by Texas law that high schools make that option available, make that have support for registering students. And I know we have many, many community partners who are happy to help us do that. I know the law allows principals to do that, but there are also many partners. And I would love some kind of regular report on how well we're doing with that, because I know in the past we've had high schools that do and high schools that don't. And just have a better sense of how well we're doing that. And I know, there have been, there's one former superintendent in Texas who, as a principal, called every 18-year-old into her office, shared a birthday card and a voter registration card and a talk about how this is now your responsibility. You're an adult. For students who were eligible, made sure that was part of it. So I think there are lots of ways to do it, and not that should be our expectation, but our expectation to follow the law and make sure we're doing that. So I would love to find a way to share just with the board and the public how well we are doing that, just so we are sure we're really meeting that goal as we kind of recommit to this culture of voting, because I know we've adopted a resolution like this in the past, and just continue that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. I know I'm looking at Oscar back there because I know that he's already working to identify those seniors for us so that we can be intentional about engaging them in that process. We also have identified partners, not necessarily for schools, but for some of our football games to participate in voter registration. And we also, okay, I'm hearing that we also have identified a partner for schools too.
They come to us. So.
Right.
So, Trustee Boswell, you know a topic I love talking about. So we do have the Civic Center and League of Women Voters who are going to help us with tables at our campuses. Our principals are actually required to be voter registrars, not just encouraged. It's a requirement. And so our social studies team, our humanities team works with them to ensure that they have that they know that it is a requirement for them to provide that offer to students and to give them some other ideas other than just these groups who can come in that can assist. We're also sending out information to them about our students who are 16 or above that can work as election workers, and that this is not only a paid opportunity for them, but as you shared, Trustee Boswell, it's also an excused absence under the Ed Code, which means that it's like they're actually there. We get funding, they don't get an absence on their record, but then they also get paid and go to take part in the civics process. So we're sharing that information with principals. It went out today. Perfect. We're also wanting to share that out in our parent and staff newsletter. That's an opportunity to them. And then, of course, we're looking at lots of other ways on how we can inform students. We've discussed things like the automatic phone call, the automatic email, needing to work through some of those things, but certainly having those discussions.
Thank you. I'm resisting the urge to jump up and down. Thank you. And I know it's an excused absence because they're learning so much when they go do that, and earning money. So thank you very much for all of that. I really appreciate it and excited to know that went out today. Thank you.
Don't leave
I hope that when I go to vote, it will be a student there.
Great.
I love that. I'm so super proud of the culture of voting thing as well. Oh, sorry.
No.
I was just so
distracted.
excited, I just jumped in. But I wanted to also ask, I had thought a couple of years ago, talking to anyway, does our district text kids when they turn 18 and tell them that they're eligible to vote? Because I thought we did, but I haven't heard about that in a couple of years.
We did do it one year. There were
Okay.
some limitations because obviously we don't have every kid's phone number.
Okay.
And it was actually a lot more manual than we expected it to be. In other words, every month they were programming what needs to go out for that month.
But we do have the Summer Melt software that we use, where we have contact with all of us, so it may not be through our vehicle, but maybe through one of our partners that we have to be able to take care of that messaging. Because I know Oscar's always working to give us more capabilities and get us up to where we want to be, but we still are lagging a little bit in those areas.
Okay, I would love to know if we are able to do something like that, so let me know, and I'll join Trustee Boswell in jumping up and down, too.
I have a question.
Yes, Trustee Sabata?
So are the students also being informed of the bond?
So I don't know if Mr. Segura or another wanted to comment on that. We obviously give factual information to our students on the bond, just like we do for the community.
Mike done left the room.
All right. Thank you.
I think in addition, just to add to that, the district usually sends out legal information about what can and cannot be done around the bonds. For
We send that
example,
to all staff.
To all staff.
Yes.
Letting them know what the guardrails are around that, what they can and can't do.
And that went out the week that the board voted.
That went out the week that the board voted. Okay, got it.
Did we get a copy of that? I'd like to know, because I want to make sure I don't push past those boundaries either.
Happy to share that email and would certainly suggest any trustee that may have questions over their legal availability to speak with Christine Padilla, who can provide some advice as well. But we'll get that email to the trustees.
Great, thank you. Trustees, any other questions on item 7.1, the culture of voting resolution? Okay, and then item 7.2, I do have a comment about that one in 7.3. For item 7.2 on worker protections, as you noticed, there was a draft resolution in your packets. I'd like to, without objection, or maybe we have some discussion here, I'd like to add 2 edits to that resolution. One is to add the following language: make reasonable efforts to achieve a 15% local hiring goal, meaning 15% of all cumulative work hours on bond projects are performed by students or graduates of ACC or an apprenticeship program registered with the U.S. Department of Labor or bilingual craft training program approved by the U.S. Department of Labor that provides hands-on training at nominal cost. That's one addition. And then secondly, to amend the current language to read pay living wages defined as the higher of ACC's minimum wage rate or the prevailing wage rate as determined by the U.S. Department of Labor in accordance with the Davis-Bacon Act, parentheses 40 U.S.C. section 276A ETSEQ. I'm trying to remember my law school, what that means, and subsequent law. And its subsequent amendments. So that's that on item 7.2 on worker protections resolution. And trustees, any other comments on workers protections resolution?
I have a quick question.
Sure, trustee Singh.
So I thought we already were in compliance with the Davis-Bacon. We are, okay.
We are. This just adds language that recognizes that on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and so I think the addition that you just made was that we pay the higher of the prevailing wage as provided by Davis-Bacon, or what was the other one? Was it ACC?
Yes, I'm trying to think of my language here. Defined as the higher of Austin Community College's minimum wage rate or the prevailing wage rate as determined by the U.S. Department of Labor.
Great. So I like that. I was just curious to know, like, are we already doing that as well, or is that?
We are not, that I'm aware of, but I don't know, Mr. Segura.
So we are, it's Davis-Bacon. Fortunately for us in all of our projects, what we're seeing right now is just given the market conditions, that the rates are vastly exceeding kind of our prevailing wage as well as Davis-Bacon. The one thing I do want to point out is that there are sometimes challenges whenever we use prevailing wages that aren't tied to the organization, for instance, AISD versus ACC or University of Texas. And the concern is that we have staff that work for AISD whose prevailing wage is tied to $16 an hour or something greater than that. And so just something to be mindful of. For bond projects, we're absolutely wanting to ensure as many protections as possible. We're very excited to support this, but just something to consider as we move.
Yeah, and so then what I might suggest is that between now and the voting meeting, we might have our board council talk to administration about whether that should be Austin ISD's minimum wage versus ACC's, just to be more consistent with that.
And an example is if someone were to use City of Austin's, their minimum wage is now $20 versus ours is $16. So you might find ourselves in our conflict without even really wanting to be in one, because our own staff would get paid less than a worker would be hiring. And so we just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's an action we can take, President Rodriguez, and work with council.
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm fully supportive of it. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Trustee Zapata.
So under this item also, do we follow the Better Builder protections?
That's what this entire resolution is about.
Okay.
It's an effort, I think, by the board to be in solidarity with the challenges of affordability for our working families here, and that includes those that construct our buildings for our teachers and our staff and our students.
Okay, so it's not called Better Builder, it's the same, but, because that's what the county uses, that's what the city use, and so I'm just wondering, we're being consistent.
We are. Yeah, we are. If you go back and look at the actual language in the resolution, it references the Better Builder program.
Okay.
And it spells out the conditions as well. And if there is any questions, I mean, feel free to raise them up, because I think we want to make sure that we have a consensus on the resolution for sure. The last one, trustees, is 7.3 electric bus resolution. I just want to make sure and ask Dr. Reach if he wouldn't mind reiterating. The electric bus resolution also incorporates the goal in our community to go net zero carbon by 2040. And one of the reasons why we don't have a separate resolution, which I think we had talked about doing, is because we already support the city's goal for the community. And I'm trying to remember the right language, Dr. Reach. So we've already been in support, the board and the administration has already been in support of net zero carbon by 2040. But I thought it was important to call it out in the electric bus, because that's the overall goal, and electric buses is one way to do it. Modernizing our buildings and creating better working conditions there is another one. And the way I've also heard Mr. Segura also talk about it is improving the air quality in our buildings because of the modernization. All of that is part of the idea of net carbon zero. But if you don't mind giving us the facts about when we did it.
And I was able to research that and speak with our sustainability team, and I did also think that our sustainability agreement that this board approved back in 2013 did include that pledge. I have learned from our sustainability team that the commitment to our sustainability pledge came before the net zero commitment with the city. So we have not technically adopted that pledge. So this resolution would cover that to ensure that we are also committing to the city's plan in adoption of that pledge.
So we were pioneers before net zero carbon by 2040 was actually a thing.
We just didn't have the name for it.
We just didn't have the name for it, so there you go. Thank you for the clarification, I appreciate it. Trustees, any other questions on this? Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next section, which is item 8, academics and curriculum. Trustees, are there any questions on this item about approval of Head Start self-assessment report? Trustee Luo.
Let's see here. So I am looking at the attachment labeled 21-22 AISD self-assessment report, and I'm looking at page 7. So I appreciate that the report has both a kind of strengths-based listing of how AISD Head Start is, what are some of the things that are working well, and also the opportunities for growth in a separate column. And I'm just wondering if folks had questions about this, and I don't mean trustees, I mean like folks out in the community, parents, grandparents, if they had questions, how would they go about getting information about this report? Not just reading it, but, having a dialogue about it. Because if you see on page, let's see, where did that little guy go? Page 5, the focus area goal, increase the percentage of students who are rated proficient on cognition indicators at exit. The result was just shy of the goal. And so I would imagine, there's probably some parents out there, or grandparents out there that would be interested in knowing, what can they do and how do they support their Head Start program? How do they support their kiddos, and how do, if one parent is too busy, maybe another adult within that Head Start campus community can do whatever needs to be done to help those kiddos. I'm just wondering about that. Like, how does that conversation, first of all, does that conversation happen? I'm sure it happens organically, but I mean, like, systematically and systemically, does that conversation ever happen with parents?
Yeah, the most immediate place to start, of course, is the campus, and I guess right now, as we are in transition, Ms. Casas would have to be able to take on those calls just until we get someone, or I know we're transitioning and onboarding a team member for that. So right now, Ms. Casas will be the call. If you can't get what you need at the campus, then of course, Ms. Casas.
I'm going to tweet out your phone number. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Well, and so maybe this is something for discussion within the administration going forward is, how do we get use of, and we, the public, how do we get use out of these reports? I have this sinking feeling that we get these reports and they just kind of live out there on the internet. And I wonder if we can think creatively about how to get this information out to the families that are actually, that have their children in Head Start programs. And again, tying it to like pragmatic, like, hey, this is what you can do, right? Like, or this is what, we've got a volunteer on our campus and they're going to, whatever it is, but like really having those conversations. My kids are really fortunate that, they're in a household with, you should hear the advanced words that they use, right? And so like, I know language acquisition and fine motor skills, all the things that set people up to succeed academically, like a lot of that happens in the home. And absolutely, like Head Start is, like I said, they were just shy of that goal that they had set for themselves on that education piece. And all the more reason for us to think about how do we get this report out to folks in a meaningful way, and then connect that to action. What can you do?
So it is something for us to think about, and I know this is an aggregate report. I would venture to believe that there's a student report that each family would get, but again, I don't know that to be a fact, and so we can take a deeper dive. Yeah, individuals, because usually that's with my Head Start experience, that's usually how that works. They have an individual student report too. So.
Could I say something? I have a comment.
Yes, Trustee Zavala?
My grandkids were in Head Start, and so I know a lot of families that have kids in Head Start. And what I like about Head Start is that they have parents sign that they have to commit so many hours of volunteer. They have to sign when they give their kids some projects to do. You know, the parents are agreeing or signing that they're going to do it with them. And so I thought it was great, you know, that my daughters who were single parents were doing it because they said, Mom, I signed that form, so well, I'm happy. You should do more than just that. But anyway, but they do have parents that are required to do so many hours, and they go and volunteer. And you know, I think they have a way to do that. They really engage with the parents. So that's the way it was with my grandkids and my friends' kids. So I think they have a process. The reports, I don't think they get reports. So that would be nice for them to say, hey, this is what we did this year. This is what we're able to accomplish because you participated and you helped us, or something like that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions on agenda item 8.1? If not, I'm going to move to the next section, which is item 9, business and finance. And please note the administration has pulled item 9.1, contract for commercial real estate services, to the October meeting. So trustees, are there any questions on the remaining items? If Trustee Singh?
Oh, wait, hold on. Never mind.
Okay.
I had one for 11.1, but we're not there yet.
Oh, okay. Then without objection, I'm going to move to section 10, human resources. Trustees, are there any questions on these items? Hearing no questions, I'm going to move to section 11, policy. Trustees, any questions on these items? And Trustee Singh?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was about 11.1, the District of Innovation Plan. So I wanted to kind of get a better understanding. I know we're not having a formal presentation on this. I would request going forward, I guess 5 years from now when we revisit this, or whenever that is, at that time, I would, if whoever's here, this is something that I feel like is important enough that should get a presentation because it covers a lot. So could, Dr. Mays, do you think that we could talk a little bit about the biggest changes on here, in particular, the removal of the certification requirement for elementary school teachers?
Sure, we do have our team here. I will say we do have a committee that consists of community members that, we have this conversation ongoing with them about this District of Innovation application. It is not something done in isolation without the input of community members as well as campus leadership. And so I'll turn it over to our team to kind of share some of the new pieces that have been added to help give us more flexibility to meet some of the areas of challenge that we have with staffing here at Austin ISD.
Good evening, President, trustees. Norma Castillo, Assistant Superintendent of Human Capital Systems. The biggest change so we had it in 2017, it went to March 2022, and we did come to the board in March and got the District of Innovation Plan approved then. We are asking for some changes from the March plan. Specifically, we want to add the area of 7 through 12 social studies and 7 through 12 English to the options that would allow us to certify someone here locally through our District of Innovation Plan. In addition, we are asking to add the EC through 6 option that would allow us to certify elementary teachers through the District of Innovation Plan. So those are the three big changes from the March plan to what we're asking for now.
Okay, and so can you tell me currently, like I believe in the past or before this change happened, we were hiring teachers who weren't yet certified, but who were enrolled in an alternative certification program, right? Okay, so
yeah,
is that? But it seems like we're not going to have. We're going to drop that requirement that they be.
We're not dropping the requirement, so that's a good question. Some of the guardrails that we have established is, first of all, we want to continue to hire certified teachers. So that's a given. We are going to continue to recruit. We continue to partner with our universities. That's going to be our first go-to. When, in absence of that, if we cannot find, then some of the guardrails are, when we do hire a teacher under the District of Innovation Plan, we send 100% of them to Region 13, which is where we have our partnership, to get certified. So in the past 5 years, we use the District of Innovation Plan mostly for languages other than English and our career technical industry certifications because those needed industry experience. So we've been sending, last year, we hired 29 people under the District of Innovation Plan. 18 of them ended up getting fully certified by the end of the year. We had a couple of extensions, and then we had some resignations. So we will continue, as soon as we hire them, we place them on a conditional contract, meaning that there are conditions, and you must enroll in an ACP, take the required exams, and we give them a 1 year, a little shy of a year, because we plan it around March when we do contracts to see, let's see where you're at, to make decisions then.
I appreciate that. Okay, so right now, like, let's say last year, were we hiring elementary teachers and requiring them, if they didn't have a certification, were we hiring them without a certificate and requiring them to enroll in an ACP
So we hire
program?
teachers different ways, right? There's umpteen ways of certification. In elementary, no, we were not hiring under elementary DOI, but we do hire in elementary teachers who come in through alternative certification, intern certificates, emergency certificates, probationary. There's different routes, so depending on what route, if someone does not already belong to an EPP, yes, we definitely 100%, because we can't hire them otherwise. So we do connect them through Region 13 immediately and pay for that.
Okay, so I would feel, so I just want to make crystal clear, because I had heard that the change that's listed here is that we are no longer requiring someone who's not certified to get an alternative certification. But
it's no longer a shall, it's a may.
Okay, so I think I would probably want, didn't we have this conversation like last week? But this time I'm saying I would like, then I did too. I would want to see a shall in here. I feel like, yeah, like that, it would be really hard for me personally to support this with the may. So, and I think we need to really be clear if this is what we're intending, because it sounds like in practice, we are sending people. It's just not, that language is not in here. So if we could match our practice, I don't know if the administration would consider making it a requirement that they enroll in an alternative certification program. For elementary, that's the main one I'm concerned about.
So I'll start and then I'll kick it back over to the team. I think the reason we brought this back was because we recognized that we needed more flexibility to address some of the vacancies that we have. This is one of those situations where, Trustee Boswell, we actually had conversations with the community, and they said initially then, you all need to open this thing up wider than what you're doing. And we were pretty constrained in what we, brought to you all to vote on the first time. But we can see obviously that, right now we do need the support or the flexibility. And I'll they can, of course, share more of the details. but I know there will be
I
flexibility.
agree, Dr. Mays. I have that on my note here. Principals are continuously asking for increased flexibility. I also want to say that there are some other guardrails, specifically with Title I schools, and ensuring that we do not disproportionately place a larger number of DOI certified teachers at Title I schools. The state does require us to notify parents when their students are in a class with a teacher that is certified under District of Innovation. And so there is that guardrail of notification to parent. Also, we will be monitoring the data as to where they are in the district.
I might also, I apologize, I might also add that obviously the flexibility comes about when you're in a situation where you are having to hire at the rate that we are having to hire. So root cause would tell you, well, that's certainly an issue that we need to address, and we are. We need to do a better job at retention and working on those intentional strategies to retain our certified staff, and when we have our folks join us that are not yet certified, getting them certified and also retaining them as well, so that we are not in this constant cyclical pattern of hiring, you know, a bachelor's degree and come on in. We want to, certainly once you're here, let's train you up, let's get you certified, let's keep you in the pipeline as well.
I appreciate that. I think, you know, when I think about some of the things that happened over the course of the year, when I look at our survey data that showed like 16% of our teachers felt that there was a feeling of trust and mutual respect in the district. When you look at our PPFT and see that most of the schools that got an A from TEA did not have a teacher that got the highest rating on the PPFT. I mean, I think there are things that we had control over. It's, you know, that resulted in an exodus of some of our teachers, not all, but a big chunk of them. And that's what's gotten us largely in the situation that we're in. And so I'm speaking for myself, of course. I personally feel like I don't want to lower our standards for hiring due to some of these administrative decisions that were made in the past that put us in this situation. I know it sounds really harsh, but that's how I kind of see it. So I would feel really good, like if we had seen like a revamp of PPFT before now, and if we had seen like, you know, this is what we're doing to, you know, make sure, like a plan to improve morale, and this is how we're doing and seeing a lot of activity, I might feel different, but I still feel like retention is key, because I went through ACP myself, by the way. And I know what a bad teacher I was my first year. And so I just am not necessarily willing to risk lowering our standards, because I know we're going to pay for it in another way. Like that's just me. But I'm sure we each have different opinions on this, but unless I feel like I would have to see that we are requiring an alternative certification enrollment for elementary. I'm not as concerned about middle and high school, but I am very concerned about elementary, because that's setting kids up. The skill there in elementary is not the content knowledge as much as it is the pedagogical knowledge. And so I hope that's something that we can have some more discussion on before we vote on this.
I wondered, Dr. Mays, if there's an opportunity to educate our board about PPFT and the methodology, because I think we have to start at a foundational level for folks that want to.
So we do plan on having the small groups. I actually was texting our resident expert as I was sitting up here to try to make sure we make the time for you all to sit and learn about PPFT. I would say that, well, I don't even want to go into the PPFT, so I'm going to stop right there, because it is a pretty extensive conversation, and I think that, you know, again, we have a resident expert that can definitely sit and school everybody, myself included, on the nuances of what led us to the scoring that we ended up having to use for teacher evaluations. To the point of morale, I think we've been having a conversation about that tonight, right? We're talking about our scorecard. We're talking about how do we measure what we treasure in terms of, morale and where our team is. And I think that since we've opened up the doors of this school year, we've been focused on morale and focused on the climate and culture and supporting principals with focusing on climate and culture. Big Red is here. She doesn't have the disguise on.
Not supposed to tell when you want
we've been really we've been really intentional about that. But now where we sit is that we have to get adults in classrooms in front of our students, and that is absolutely a priority. And we would not be coming back and asking you all for that flexibility if we didn't feel like we had to at this point.
I would like just to add that there's a short bridge between hiring these teachers and the support we're going to give them. And we've worked closely together to ensure that as soon as they get in there, we're creating a differentiated learning series for these teachers because we recognize that they have different needs. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we're not just hiring and then, okay, good luck. There is strategic support that has been built in for these teachers that we're hiring that don't necessarily have the preparation that other teachers would have traditionally.
Agreed, and so we do look forward to small group information sessions and some learning around PPFT. It is, there's a lot to it, but I will say that our team is listening. We have made some adjustments. We will be happy to share those with you, but in addition to that, to your point about, what has transpired thus far, and leaning into that uncomfortableness that we were talking about earlier is we can have high standards, we can have high accountability, we have to lean into also support around that and really supporting our employees, because anytime we put any sort of, if there's any sort of change, if there's any sort of, process that a person doesn't understand and we don't support them support them through it and educate, then it's just done to you. And so we are looking forward to being able to share that process and the supports that we're building around it specifically this year, full release mentorships, et cetera, et cetera. So we look forward to that.
Thank you. Trustee Boswell?
I'd like to share a second for the shall. I feel that would help me be a little bit more comfortable with this. I know our educators are a huge strength, and I went and looked when this item showed up and would love a conversation about what the data really show us about how teachers with different kinds of certifications, what the outcomes for students are, what the experiences for students are. What I went and found was very mixed. And I want to be sure we're not rushing into this situation where we know we are desperate for a human in a classroom, that we're not making choices that are going to haunt us down the road. And I do see a profound difference between a language other than English teacher, where content knowledge is probably an immensely important thing with CTE teachers and some of these other positions. And I'll say that I have, a lot of content knowledge about some things, and I have no business teaching in a classroom because I don't have that knowledge. I don't have that expertise. And I have concerns about doing this at all, and absolutely concerns about doing it without requiring a certification pathway for the people who are stepping in, and hearing that it was, we're talking about 20 people, not 200 people, also helps. But for every kid in those classrooms, that I do have some concerns. So I need some more knowledge between now and when we vote on this, and would strongly hope that we will consider a shall. At the very least, and maybe narrowing the list of who we're looking for. And really want to go back to the fact that for a long, long time, I don't know that we still are, but we were the district in Texas with the most national board certified teachers. We have had an excellent, professional, deeply experienced teaching staff, including many excellent teachers who came from industry, who came through alternative certification programs. There was a Texas Teacher of the Year here in Austin ISD who absolutely came from a different pathway from, professional life, and has given an immense amount to her students. So I think there's, I want to be really sure we're doing this thoughtfully as we do it, and I would like a little more knowledge. And I know I put some questions in the tracker that I haven't seen the answers to yet, and so that might help some, but a small group conversation about the reality and the impact of this would be helpful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions? Okay.
May I address the content knowledge? That was a good point that I failed to mention. So we're not just hiring anybody with any degree. Our team will look at a college degree and see in the teachers mostly that we're hiring do have content knowledge, meaning you're a math grad, you're a science grad, you are a grad in elementary. It's a little bit different because it's general studies, but we are looking for content knowledge here in-house. We're not just saying, okay, you have a degree in, gosh, I don't know, business and you're teaching English, you know? That's not what we're doing. We are doing transcript reviews, checking for that content knowledge.
Thank you for that. That's immensely helpful. And again, if that's what we're doing, I would love to see that reflected in what we're requiring. If we're doing it, we should, in my opinion, I would like to see it written down and committed to not just what we're hoping to do, but what we're committing to doing and letting the community know that we're doing. Because here I know, and I really appreciate that. And I see some value in that. I know that's what you teach does. I know there are lots of reasons, and I know that one thing, you know, that there is a real need for secondary math and science teachers, especially with that content knowledge, and that's very powerful. So I support that very much, and but I would love to see that reflected. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Boswell. Any other discussion? If not, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're gonna move to section 12, other. So trustees, any questions on any of these items, 12.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, and 0.5? Okay, hearing none, this will end our regular agenda preview. We will now recess the open meeting at 8:53 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, and 551.071. For our viewers at home, this concludes our live broadcast. When we're finished with the executive session, we will briefly return to open session to formally adjourn the meeting. The adjournment will be recorded and be included in all replays of tonight's meeting. Thank you all for joining us and have a good evening. Good evening. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 10:10 p.m. Secretary Singh, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Boswell to adjourn, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. The meeting is now adjourned at 10:11 p.m. Thank you.
Woohoo.